Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of Elite FTS for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it. Now, onto the show.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. What's going on, guys? Today it's just Sam and I. We're gonna just shoot the shit. We have some questions that we pulled off my Instagram, I believe it was.
Yep, all over the place.
And sometimes when we're doing the lives or the other podcast, we have to rush the answers because there's so many other questions coming in, or we'll have a guest that we don't want to interrupt the guest with the flow that they have. So every now and again, it's better just to kind of step back, take some of the questions that we know you guys are interested in, or topics. You know, some of them really aren't questions, just going to be topics, and just kind of go a little deeper on them and see what people think about it.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to go with today.
Perfect. Actually, let's start it off with, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on not only the Train Your Ass Off videos, the fact that we're running that again, which is amazing, which is awesome, but also the Juji videos and all the videos that you are in coaching. You're in your element, you're working with these athletes and these people. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is that you make it look easy. Like it looks very clear from start to finish, but that process and what you actually do during that process has taken years and years and years of development. I kind of want to jump into, how you coach, like how you can actually implement all the knowledge that you have to work with these people and give our listeners and our audience a chance to kind of take away some of that information and help guide them to, better coaching in the future.
I actually put some thought into this one because since the first Train Your Ass Off posted a couple of years ago, hell, it might be 3 years ago now.
Right. A
lot of people were asking that, and my general canned answer is, I don't know, I've just been doing it for so long. And I never really sat down and really thought it through from the perspective of how would somebody else acquire the same skill set? And then not only how could they acquire the same skill set, but how could they acquire the same skill set in a shorter period of time? Because as I laid this out, it's going to be a little bit of my history, but I think it matters. I think the story matters to kind of build to what's going to go in there, because there's a lot to it when I got to thinking about it. But it came down to three main areas, and those are my own training experience, which I'll tap into that a little bit, the teaching experience, and I'll tap into that, and then the education. So if you really think about it, the living, which is my training experience, the education, the learning, and then the teaching, which is the passing on. So, it's always weird to me how it always comes back to that. And I'm still learning, so that's a whole nother part of this. But when I was thinking about this, training in groups has always been an important thing. So I'm going to start with my training experience. So when the first gym I went to was a powerlifting gym. Maybe I had a very short period of time in a garage and did home and just stupid shit like that. I don't even count that. But it was being put into a powerlifting gym, and then it was training with power lifters. It was groups. And group training still happens now, but back then I'm sure there were outliers that trained by themselves, but that just wasn't the case. So I put in a group. So squat day, you had a bench day, you had a deadlift day, and you're being taught, do this, do this, do this, do this. So at the time, it's just like, okay, I'm just being coached on how to do it. I'm just doing it. It's not like I'm really paying that much attention to the why. It's just doing it. And then over a period of time, the people in the group are like, do you see how he's doing that? You see how he's doing that? You need to do that. You need to not do that. So these little observations were being pointed out, And keep in mind, I'm a teenager. I just want to lift bigger weights, you know. So it's more of a subconscious thing that's going on because I'm part of this dynamic and part of this group for several years. And then it was more along what felt right, what didn't feel right. And then you can say cues. I didn't even know what cues were back then. It's just, this is what you tell this guy to do because he screws this up. So make sure to tell this guy to do this. Tell this guy to do this. Don't tell this guy to do this because, you know, so it was all different. And it made sense to me because that's how wrestling was. That's how my football was. It's how all the other sports were. So it's just kind of how that was. And then towards my senior year, when the football coach wanted me to start helping in the weight room, then, I mean, it's just universal machines, but then it was like, well, how do I show these people how to bench like I bench, right? So I'm not saying that's right. You know, looking back is completely wrong.
But it was the experience that you had.
It was the experience. Okay, I need to show these people to bench, you know, this way because what they're, well, actually it was better than what they were doing.
Of course
it was. Just bouncing the bars and shit like that. So, and then realizing, holy cow, this teaching people sucks. Like this sucks. And it's like, and then I remember at that point, it was like, how did they do this to me? Like how, and granted, I loved it. So there's that big difference there too. I was a sponge, I'm absorbing it, but it's how are they doing that? And then why? Then when I went back with that group, because the weight training group was just, I got out of study hall to sit in the weight room and supervise so the coaches could go have coffee across the street at McDonald's. But if I'm going to sit there, I wanted to do something. So then I would ask, well, why you say this? Why you say this? Why do you say this? What would you say to somebody that only has a 135 pound bench or 95 pound bench? What would you do? What would you have them do? And so that base was kind of being developed without me even knowing I was developing that base.
Right.
And that's a span of probably 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 6 years. You know, so 6 years of developing a base I didn't even know I was developing. I just wanted to get stronger. And part of getting stronger, I started to realize was helping other people get stronger because then I could see things better. And we didn't film things. You didn't have the phones and all this stuff. So if you filmed something, you had this big clunky, we just didn't do it.
Shoulder camera.
Yeah,
right.
You just didn't do it. So you had to rely on the people you were training with. So if the main group couldn't train at a certain period of time and it had to split, which had to happen with me during wrestling and football a lot of times. So then I'd have 3 or 4 other people come in with me. Then I'd have to tell those people, hey, now when I squat, make sure I do this. You know, make sure I sit here. Make sure I don't do this. Make sure my heels stay flat was kind of one of those things. I think it's a high school thing. Always squat up on your toes, right? Make sure my heels stay flat. And then for a period of time, it was always remind me to stick the 25-pound plates under my toes. That way I put the shift a little bit back further. Or sometimes it was under the heels. It depended upon what we were doing. But I had to tell them what to have me do.
Right.
Right. So
you had to teach them to teach you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And this all comes into play as I keep going. I said I was going to make this short, but obviously I'm not.
All right.
So then I get into when I went to college, there was a blip in the powerlifting. To be honest, it's because the friends I had at the time, which I've never had a large group of friends. So my friend, you know, my two friends were bodybuilders. And I'm like, oh, well, let's do that. Then I had access to a commercial gym. I'm like, well, this shit might be cool to do for a little while. And that's all the magazines and stuff. So, but the important thing to keep in mind there, completely coincidental again, they happen to both be, you know, either IFBB pros or top 5 contenders in the nationals. Both of them, I believe, ended up being IFBB pros, or one of them did but never competed. And they were both they were strong as fuck for being little dudes. So I'm talking, you know, they're competed as bantam lightweight, so what that was at the time, say 165, something like that.
Yeah.
Both of them could rep out 405 in the bench for 5s. I mean, so they were strong.
Right.
But on everything we did, technique, And I was I don't want to say so. I was way stronger than I was really strong back then. You know, I have no problem saying that because some of the shit that I was doing was just insane. I don't even know how I did it. It didn't transfer back to powerlifting, but they kept trying to dial it back. Like, there's no reason why you should be doing this. Slow the tempo down, you know, flex harder, you know, try to extend the range of motion a little bit more. Turn your wrist, do this. And this is in all the bodybuilding type movements. So then the same thing. Hey, especially if they were going heavy. Hey, when I start to go heavy on the bench, make sure I don't flare. Make sure the bar doesn't start drifting too high on my chest. Because this old school. So old school, they used to do a lot of neck presses, which is dumb as fuck. But they used to do a lot of that. But if you went heavy, you knew you were smart enough. You don't do that. You just did that shit with like 135. But watch the placement. Watch the bar. Make sure that the load doesn't look like it's all on my pec insertion, right? Or the pec tendon. And again, I don't know what the fuck. You know, I'm just watching how the muscle contracts. And I remember being amazed because when leaner, you can see exactly what's going on.
Right.
So it's like, oh shit, maybe you don't want to do this because I'm not seeing the muscle work how I think you want it to work. Try this. Turn your wrist, do this, you know, stick your thumb up, pull your thumb back, whatever it was going to take. And then you could see, bam, the muscles popping or the muscles contracting harder. And then right back again, you know, stop, do this. And that was just kind of part of that group dynamic. Once that, then it went back into the powerlifting groups again through the rest of college with the same thing. So the group, what I'm getting at is the group dynamic is a huge thing because I was around people that put a very strong emphasis on technique and then reinforced it that the reason why you want the better technique is your gains are going to be better. You're going to be stronger. You're not going to get hurt. So that was probably the most important because if you got hurt, you can't compete. It's like, it was always okay to get hurt in the off season. Like push it, do stupid shit in the off season. But as soon as it starts getting close to a show or a meet, you can't get hurt. You got to be super smart and really, really pick your shit correctly. But before you even get into the exercise selection and picking things, it was what can you do right? You know, so if there were certain things that were always a clusterfuck, like for me, old school T-bar rows, which just, right? So I could never do those right. And it always jacked my back up. Well, obviously it's pulling your spine this way and down. Now I know why. But back then it's like, man, this is something we don't do getting close to a show. And for powerlifting, I'm not doing it at all. You know, so, but it was other things like that. It's like, well, this exercise in the off season did really well. Let's slide it back in there during the preseason. So there was a sounding board of people who were better than me, which I think is a key thing.
You don't see that a lot nowadays,
yes.
Right?
So there were people that were better. And then even in the powerlifting group, it went back to that. So it was back to that, okay, who am I training with and who's better than me? You know, and if there's not somebody better than me, we need to find that person. I need to find that person because I had mentors, right? And that's a different thing because at the time Bob Wall was one and he was still kind of competing, but not really, but he wasn't always going to be there. And I mean, the little dude squatted what I did and he was 148, 165. So, but I had to have somebody because I don't know the answer to this, but I never wanted to be the top guy in the group. And I don't know why, you know, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. You can see it as a good thing, but you can also see it as a bad thing because you're not really willing to put yourself at the top of that ladder. Or aside from that, mentally, you don't see yourself at being the top of the top, you know, so you wanted somebody there. But having the group was I'm going to keep reiterating that was huge because you're around people and that were better. That's the other thing I need to re-harp on. But the other thing I need to harp on is these people that I were training with and myself, our progress and our rank, I don't know what I'm looking for, our progress rank, advancement was all based upon progression was all based on being stronger or being bigger, or being leaner, if it's the
very clear
bodybuilder.
goals.
Very clear, right? But also very clear that if you weren't getting that, then you shouldn't be in the group.
Right.
And
you're not keeping up.
So so let's fall back onto the squat, bench, and deadlift teaching that we're talking about. It had to get better because of the group that I was in and the way that it was, because the only metric we really had was how you going to do in the meet. So it doesn't matter what your training is. It doesn't matter what all the other stuff is. It doesn't matter how big your leg press is, your chin up, your push up, your lunge, your whatever it is. It doesn't matter. What matters were these three things. So those three things were the top of the hierarchy, right? So all the way to the very beginning. So of course I'm going to look at the squat, bench, and the deadlift completely different than anybody else, because I wouldn't have been a part of the groups I was in if they didn't get better. I wouldn't have been a part of the groups I was in if they didn't get better, right? Because then what value do I bring to them? So if you have to, you get what I'm saying? So,
absolutely.
So it would be like being a 100-meter sprinter, right? And never sprinting and never getting better.
Never getting any faster.
And never getting any faster.
Right.
Then, so there's that was the foundation of developing something I didn't even know I was developing, because you're just helping all these other people the same way that they're helping you. And because I had so many years of doing it, I'm better at it. So I could see things in a different perspective than other people because of this. And there were always other people too, the better people. They're saying, look at that. You see that? See that? And then I went to Westside, and then everything that I thought I knew, and I did, I don't even want to say doubled it, it tenfolded. Because then I went into an environment where everybody was me. Everybody was seeing things from that scope. So it wasn't one or two people in the group or just me and the better guy in the group. It was everybody. Every rep, every exercise, everything. And that's 14 years of that. So when I add up all those people, again, it's like 150, 200 people. But it's not just 150 and 200 people. It's the hours of reinforcing, looking, and being aware. I guess that's what I'm looking for, is being aware of what's going on with that. So then that's the first part, is the training part. And not just training, but being aware of what's going on and being hyper aware, and that's why I think that's how I learned to be able to see things other people probably don't see, but also to be able to see things out of the corner of my eye to know it's important or not important. So there could be something going on over on a deadlift platform and I'm doing the squat and it's just, okay, it's no big deal. There's nothing that important. Or, oh shit, this is important. We need to go address that, because that's just kind of how that whole environment was. Seminars came next, and that was helping Louie with the seminars. And then branching out with, I think the first ones were, I think it's just called the Westside Seminar. And then it was a Tour de Force seminar. They're basically all the same things. So it's showing people how to squat, bench, and deadlift, and then, or how to squat, deadlift, take a break, and then how to lay out the program. And then the next day was the bench. There's probably, there's between 150 and 200 of those over, I started those, and that's how I started the company. I mean, so 1998, all the way through. And where this becomes significant in answering these questions is those seminars never really exceeded more than 20 people, 25 people. If they did, they were on other platforms. So the Learn to Train had 7 platforms. So I'm only on one platform. I can only work with 15 people, 20 people at a time. But with those, I had to learn how to break down the issues fast, how to fix them fast, how to Band-Aid them, and then pull them aside to say, this is just a Band-Aid, it has to be addressed later.
Well, that whole idea of a triage, right? Like you have 15 or 20 people, and like we can't understate how difficult that is, right? To be able to have that many people at one time doing an activity, and to be able to bounce from one person to the next person, looking at different things, understanding who you're dealing with, like that itself is a skill that you've had to develop over years and years.
Yes, but keep in mind how I came into it. I came into it training in groups of probably 5 to 10 people. And with these groups, you were all squatting in the same rack. It was, back then, it was not a thing to squat in somebody else in 2 different racks. Hell, most gyms didn't even have 2 racks. So you just had the 1 rack. So I was already doing it, but training, so it was already part of it. This just became different because the demographic began to expand. Right. So it wasn't people who were competing at the same level or been training the same period of time. Every now and again, somebody get thrown in there that may have only been training a couple of years. But in every single one of, and even today, the Train Your Ass Off is just an extension of that, just a different way of doing it. I don't stop working with somebody until it's where it needs to be. So it's not like a instruction seminar. It never has been. It's not like, okay, here's 100 people, stand up here, I'm going to show person A how to squat, you guys just learn from it, take notes, do whatever you got to do.
There's a PowerPoint.
That's right. To me, that was worthless. It was a waste of people's time. It's educational, yes, I get that. But if you're really trying to help somebody, you need to put them under the bar. You need to try to figure out where you can help best, where the low-hanging fruit is, which is what most of these things really are. It's picking the low-hanging fruit and then kind of going from there. But to do it with 20 people, like you said, in a set time period. I mean, you're trying to get this done before lunch. And so you want to get through the squat and the deadlifts before lunch and then kind of go from there. But sometimes it didn't happen that way. Sometimes they would go to 11 o'clock and it didn't stop until the people were satisfied with what it was. And so now you start adding those people up, there's 3,000 or 4,000. So, and that still isn't like a huge number. To me, it's not, but it's enough. Look at that's what I'm saying is every one of these lifts, and when if anybody's been to one of the seminars, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. You're just not getting under the bar for 3 or 4 reps. You're gonna get under there, I think it's an average of 5 to 6 sets of 2 to 5 reps each time, and you're not gonna stop until the form's good. Now you might not have 500 pounds in your back. It's still, I'm not gonna take somebody up that isn't ready to go up. They have to fix that.
But sometimes they are, and you do.
Sometimes you have to, sometimes you have to do that. That skill was built then, of that being able just to find stuff fast and find the most important. And that's probably when the skill of seeing that people learn differently and you can't just use the same cues or the same style with every single person. So that's where, and I made a note. The third big component is my education, right? So I don't want to undermine that. So there is a college education. Do I think it's worth it? If I was to just give you a flat answer quick, I'd say no. But because I use so little of that, but it helped with the bullshit detector. What the education, and I'm not telling people to not get a college degree. I'm not saying that at any extent at all. It will help. What I'm saying is it's providing you with the bare minimum that you need to do that you see me doing. Right?
It's only a piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, no, we're talking about teaching a squat, bench, and deadlift like these people are asking about.
Yep.
I never saw a fucking barbell. Maybe one class did I actually see a barbell in the whole class. But I learned how the body moves, the biomechanics, I learned those things, but the difference between when I was in school and even the seminars that I've taken, and there was a lot of those too, and the educational materials that I read and the educational materials I view, and there's a ton of I don't want to devalue that in this conversation because there's tens of thousands of hours with that. I absorb it differently. All right, some of this is going to probably be an excuse because of the dyslexia and all the other stuff. I am not absorbing that shit to be able to regurgitate it in a seminar or to regurgitate it in a podcast or Instagram. I don't fucking care. Half the times, if you were to sit there and say, Dave, what are the names of the muscles of your entire back? I don't fucking, it's your lats, your traps, your erectors. At one point in time, yes, I could name all those. I probably still spelled them wrong, but I could name them all. When I sat in the classes and when I go through these materials, I'm thinking, how can I use this? So my brain is just turning. How can I use this? How can I use this? Right? So the Krebs cycle, I learned 1,000,000 times, right? Every single time I learned it, it's like, how can I use this? How does this pertain to if I'm training somebody, if it's, cardiovascular, if it's, anaerobic, aerobic, does this even help me in any way? And so then my notes, God, I wish I didn't throw them all away. All my college notebooks, all my notebooks, it has nothing about that material. It's the ideas that are coming to me as I'm going through there. So it wasn't, so there's that. So that all together is what you see if you're watching this Train Your Ass Off, or it's a Meadows clip and I'm trying to fix somebody's squat. That's not something I just learned, 2 weeks at Westside Barbell, or because I went to a certification somewhere, or all these other things. It's been acquired over 40 years. So now to flip it, like I'm supposed to do 15, 20 minutes ago, how would I tell somebody else to do that, right? Because I can't sit here and be the, oh God, what did I say? Bragging. I can't sit there and say, oh, you never can because you're not going to put 40 years into it. Right. Keep in mind, the first 6 years, I didn't even know what, I didn't even know I was acquiring this. I was just, call it paying your dues or whatever you want to be able to do it. But I wasn't actively trying to pay attention to what was going on. It was just what was going on. So you're absorbing it. And then the other half, probably all through college, was selfish. It was just for me. Like, how do I get stronger? I think I gave a fuck. I mean, I cared about if I was managing the gym at the time, I cared about the people came in, but I wasn't their trainer. I wasn't their coach. I'd answer questions, but fuck it. I had my own training to worry about. So you take all that away and make it more focused on how could I use this with other people.
Yeah, that's the big point.
Then I can condense that quite a bit. So what I would say is, if this is a skill set people want, and that would be the first question. Actually, the first question is this a skill set you want? Because for what? Right? I mean, that's the biggest question. For what?
Right. Is if they're a coach, or if they just want to gain a little bit more knowledge and insight so they can help themselves get stronger.
Well,
right?
I mean, I'm really, really good. I mean, I'm probably the best thing I'm good at is helping people with the squat, bench, and the deadlift. I can't earn a living on that, at least not in any way that I've found. It's why I sell equipment and I sell all this other stuff, because I couldn't figure out how to really make a living on it. So it's like, well, fuck, if I can't use this to actually create a better life, then I'll just give it away, and then hopefully the people will buy the products and appreciation for that. And then I can make a living off of doing that.
Sure.
So now that may have changed, and I'm not saying that somebody can't. I'm just saying that's kind of how I saw it. So why is a pretty big question to ask, right? Because it may not matter, for you. But that would be the first thing. Is this something you really want to take to that level? Because in full transparency, they're just 3 exercises. So if you're a strength and conditioning coach, there's a lot of other exercises too. So there are 3 exercises you can build a whole philosophy around, most definitely. But there's still 3 exercises. So do you want to be really, 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 really good at 3 exercises, or coaching 3 exercises, or moderately good in 20? So that's why I'm saying why.
It's like the idea of a jack of all trades, sort of an idea with that. Like, yeah. But that's a good question to ask. Is like, is someone willing to commit this much time and effort into something, and even for anything, right? Whatever you're trying to get done in life, like, you have to ask yourself these questions and have that self-awareness, which is so important.
Yes.
Because if you're like, I want to do this thing, and you're like, how long do I have to do this thing for?
That's what I'm saying.
You're like, what the fuck?
I mean, you want to follow the same path as 40 years for what?
You're still doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still going.
Yes. And, but I would say outside of that, you personally should train with intent, right, and purpose. So all your training sessions, like, what are you training for, right? And I don't like the whole why thing. I don't really, even though I just said it, I really don't. What's your why? Like, who gives? I like the question why, but I don't think you have this global why.
Yeah.
But what is if you're just working out to work out, then you're not going to develop this ability that I'm talking about. And it's not just with those lifts. There's still going to be the other lifts at all, because that makes it all matter more, because then you're going to want to pay more attention to your surroundings. You want to pay more attention to what other people are doing. You're going to start to be able to see through the bullshit and see what's really working and get to the meat of the matter.
And you can develop that nuance for the subject.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the person that training is everything, so say the people that are going to compete in squat, bench, and deadlift, that's where it is, or the bodybuilding, training's everything. They're going to walk into a gym, and even on their worst days, with a different perspective and mindset than the person that's just going to maybe wants to compete here and there, maybe not, and then it just kind of scales down. So I'm not saying you have to be there, but you have to have enough purpose and intent to want to pay attention to what's going on. So then educate yourself, obviously, and by that, I'm just going to throw random things out there. If you can go to seminars, go to seminars. But when you go to the seminar, first off, watch how the seminar is being conducted. If we're talking about the specific skill that I'm talking about, if somebody's just showing you how to train somebody and they have a couple people demonstration here and there, pay attention. But to me, I think that has limited value. Now, if you can get into a more closed session, to where it can be a little bit more intimate, and not just for you, you need to be close enough to hear whoever is doing the instruction teach other people. So say if it's a rotation, like I have the 10, 15 people or whatever is going to be in that rotation, you're going to learn more on what other people are being told than what you're going to learn doing it yourself.
Absolutely. That was my biggest takeaway from doing the Train Your Ass Off. It was that I got to, it was like I almost hurried up through my rep so I could watch the interaction between the other athletes and you to gain that knowledge and insight, because I can see the same thing you're seeing and be like, oh, fuck, I didn't even look at that.
Yes. So that's super important because you got to be able to feel it, but you got to be able to see it. And then you can see those other things. But when I'm saying pay attention, you also want to pay attention to the conversations the people that are in the wing over here are having before they even go, right? Because you're going to hear, I don't know if this is bullshit, this don't feel right. You're going to feel, you're going to see, and then they go one or two more times, and then you listen to that interaction that they're having over there again. It's like, wow, this feels way better. Okay, oh, now what happened, right? Because they went from, I'm not buying this bullshit, to this felt better. And if you're paying attention, you'll know what happened to get there. So that's if you're attending the seminars, clinics, and stuff like that. If it's in a gym where there's people that are training that are serious, you want to pay attention to the dialogue that's going on basically the whole time if you can, without looking like you're a creeper. But I mean, because what you're going to hear outside of that main, obviously there's a queuing and all that you're going to see there. In any group, there's still going to be queuing on everything all the time. But what you're going to hear in the other conversations is why the queuing's happening, what changes in the queuing. If in that dynamic, it feeds off itself. So it's not just one person telling all them. If it's a good group, it's the one person telling one person, and then that person says somebody, then it circles around, and it moves in that direction. So that can significantly increase that learning curve, because you're witness to seeing all these things while you're still being a part of it. And I would say that is, the only reason I'm hesitating is because time matters. Like, consistent time of doing the same thing matters over a period of time. What I want to say is I think that actually matters more than anything else, is being in that environment and that group to where that happens. I'm only saying that because I've always had small groups here, smaller now than I probably ever had, but I've always had small groups here. And the ones that are consistent and that stay and that show up within 2 to 3 years, not only do their totals and everything go way up, they're coaches. And they're not being taught to be coaches, but they absorb enough that I could basically say, hey, look, go over there and watch them, and have no issues with what they were going to do. If they get stuck, then yeah, we can get it unstuck. But 50%, 60% right out. And why? Right? Because it's not like, come here, watch this, watch this, watch this. It's just absorbing what's going on and what's being said amongst the other people that are there. And these groups still exist, all over the place. You just got to find the right gym, the right place to be able to go. A lot of people train at home, right?
Right.
So I got to address that. With that, I would say I'm not a big fan of exclusively using instruction videos. So it's a video of me saying, here's how you squat. Here's a model showing you how to squat. I'm not a big fan of those because that model's not you, but if you watch enough people do those, so not me, so you watch me and 10 other people that have been doing the same kind of thing over a period of time, you're going to find consistent
common threads.
You're going to find common threads. You're going to find different cues, different reasonings, but as soon as you understand that, say if it's a squat, there's different styles of a squat. Right? And it's not all a wide sit back squat. There's different styles. And there's different technique and styles. So somebody can have, let's say the technique is just textbook. Close stance, medium stance, wide stance, long femur, short femur, all that kind of stuff. All right. So that's pretty simple to kind of find. But then there's styles, like how this person's going. So another weather heat wave thing. So we got cut off at the stop asking why and start asking how. The main point I'm trying to make with that is, as I noted earlier, when I was going through my education, I always wanted to know how I could use something for myself. And in my experience, keep in mind it's biased and it's limited on what we're talking about, is 99.9% of the time, nobody has ever asked me why. Like, Dave, can you explain exactly why this works? And I can probably bullshit through it, or at least give resources of where they can go look. And that's typically what I'll do, is give the resources there to go there, because I don't want to spend the mental bandwidth to be able to do that, because then all I really become is a lecturer. A professor, and I'm not a professor, I'm not a lecturer, I'm just a dumb meathead that knows how to make people's lifts stronger, but how is what my obsession with these lifts has always been for myself. How can I make this person stronger? Because in the squat, bench, and deadlift, because that's the marker of the success to me. Because if they're coming to me or they're asking me questions, or if it's consulting, the end result of how it helps or doesn't help based upon what I'm helping them with is those 3 lifts need to get better. And if they don't, I suck. So in my biased answer with this is very biased answer. I'm going to say it again. All right. So 3 biases. I'm going to say it again. Is I also like those 3 movements, because if I like to say that I specialize in anything, it's in the maximum strength development. So that's maximum strength output. Those 3 movements are 3 movements that are compound movements that pretty much can carry over to any other exercise, right? So I can see somebody squat to a point. All these things are to a point. I can see a squat go from a 200-pound squat to a 500-pound squat, and guarantee you their lunging will be better, their chin-ups will be better, their push-ups will be better, their single leg squats will be better. All these other things are going to be better, right? Take the squat away, do all those other things. Is that going to take their 200-pound squat to a 300-pound squat or a 350 squat? Most definitely no. Does that, it's my bias, I'm saying it again, 4 times. So I'm trying to get the biggest bang out of the training economy from that to where, so I'm not saying those things are worthless. What I'm saying is I think you get from a maximum strength perspective, you get better bang for the buck on the 3 main compound lifts. You can throw other ones in there, the bent over rows, shit like that. You can throw other things in there. But those 3 get a better bang from the buck, because with most athletes, most coaches, most people that I deal with, the first issue with everything, if it's knee stability, ankle stability, low back, all this kind of stuff, they're just not strong. Mm-hmm. Get them stronger. It fixes most of that shit. Or you can spend a year doing physical therapy stuff to fix the stuff that could have been fixed a lot sooner, a lot sooner from that. Now there's a tipping point, right? So let's go further down the road and say, okay, now you got the lineman with a 550, 600 pound squat and going to an 800 pound squat, right? Mm-hmm. Is that going to make him better? No. All right. Now, if he goes from that 600 pound squat to 750 squat, is the single leg stuff going to get better? No. There's a point of diminishing returns, but with most of the people that I see, that middle part is vast, right? So very vast, mm-hmm. that if time was just spent working those movements to actually make them stronger, here comes my real biased answer, to make them stronger. And if people focused more on making those things stronger, we would see less of what we see in the industry now. I think a lot of things that we see, a lot of trends, a lot of fads, a lot of things that come through the strength and conditioning industry come through because you have coaches that, influencers, coaches, whatever, trainers, I'm trying to find a word that kind of encompasses everybody, but there's always outliers. Mm-hmm. They can make people a little stronger to a point. So just to throw numbers out. So say they can get somebody squat from 185 pounds to 275. They don't have the skill set or the background knowledge, education, experience to be able to get them to 315 or 400. So they find something else. It's like, well, I can't do that. I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to look like shit. So I'm going to focus on X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. And then there's the new trend. There's the circulating. Not saying those things aren't good. Saying that that's where a lot of people fall, because this becomes their limiting factor. So they bias again.
Yeah, they run into that wall.
Yes. Yeah. So there's always outliers. There's always that. But that's the first thing that I look at from my perspective if I'm vetting a coach or a certification or whatever that's going to be, is what is this for? What is this actually intended to teach people? And then is this basically a hidden way to get around the fact that they just can't make people stronger? Right? Bias again. I'm not, I've said it 8 times. So I'm not hiding my bias, right?
Right.
But it's out there, and I do think it's real. Now, how rampant it is, I don't know. Because they can flip it back on me and say, well, Dave, you're biased because you don't like all those other things because you just suck at them. Right? And, I've never had you see what I'm saying? So
right,
it's
right.
That's why when I said earlier, you have to look at, different people, how they coach, what their bias is,
where they come from.
Like where are they coming from?
Yep. Because
if somebody calls me out of my bias, they say, oh, okay, I got it. Right. And then it doesn't mean I'm right. It means I'm biased. Jesus Christ. Let's talk about where your bias is and where it is. And let's figure out where this little middle area is, because I'm probably wrong. Right. And you're probably wrong, where it's all right. If you really want to get down to it, how much of this really is grounded in 100% fucking science?
Yeah, no, we don't know what the fuck we're doing anyway.
It's just people are going to get pissed, but it's still a fucking very educated guess, right? So I'm not saying that a monkey can throw a dart on different exercises and different programming.
But the odds of that happening, that may actually be pretty high odds.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go.
Seen the internet.
Yeah. Now that I just long-winded the shit out of this, go into what you had.
Yeah, so I think a couple of the major things I want to circle back on is when you were talking about when you were just getting into training, you were in a situation where you didn't necessarily know the end goal was going to be anything more than just getting stronger, right? You did not think that you would be getting in here with the company, working with who you work with. That was never part of the plan. The plan was simple. It was, I'd go to this room every week and learn things and get stronger. Like that was it. You weren't even trying to learn things. You were just trying to get fucking stronger. Like that was it. And that's so important that you just jumped into the pool and you were like, I don't know what way is up. I don't know what the long-term goal here is, but this simple goal that I have for me right now is to get stronger.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the time, and from the interactions I've had with some of our listeners and our viewers, is that they get this paralysis by analysis where they start thinking about a goal and then thinking about the million different ways to get there. And then they think about what if they commit to one thing and not another thing? And then all of a sudden they're not doing anything at all, right? You took a step. It was one step. It was get stronger. That was it. But your experiences and your knowledge that you've gained from those experiences refined that process so you were able to look at the same situation with a clearer lens.
Yes.
It's kind of like like a step loading, you know?
Well, and at the same time, it became harder to get better. You know, because you do it for a certain period of time, it gets really hard, you know, to get better. And then the people you're around, you know, because you're getting around better people, you know, all the time. And I always wanted to put myself in the bottom of a group where they're in the same boat. So it's no longer, hey, this is easy just to put 50 pounds on a bench in a year. It's like, fuck, how do I just get back to where I was? Let's just start there. And then how do I get a PR? So that's when you can't bitch about it. You can't, because you can't change the situation you're in.
Right.
It's like, this is where it is. You know, I'm hurt, I'm injured, or this just happened. I just ended up sucking again for some reason. I can't magically snap my fingers and fix that. I can't stick a needle in my ass and fix that immediately. I just can't do that. So it's like, okay, I can't just rely on what I used to do. I have to find something. I need to find what I'm missing here. Like, what am I missing? And you find out as you go through the process, you're missing a lot. And then you start closing that, and it's like, well, shit, where else can I look now? And it gets harder, you know, to find those other places to look. But to those people that are what you described, the thing that was kind of going through my head was that still doesn't change the journey. Right? Because their destination, their objective, it might change. But say they want a bigger bench and then they decide, oh, I don't know if I want that. Maybe I just want to get bigger. I don't know if I want that. Maybe I want to get leaner. That doesn't change. You still need to be in the gym. You still need to be training. It will change diet, long-term objectives, but that still doesn't change. With whatever that objective is, you still need base training.
Right.
So if that, I have a hard time, to be honest, understanding that. Because yes, you got to jump in, you know, and I happened to jump in, you know, I was thrown in, right? So I was thrown in, but it was a pool I enjoyed,
right?
You know, so it wasn't like cold water, hot water. It was like, this is cool. I liked it. Actually, I liked it a lot, you know? And so, but I don't understand why, and there's a disconnect with me a little bit. Why even start? Like if you don't know kind of where it's going and you can't somewhat see, you know, something out there, I don't understand why start. I don't, I have a serious disconnect there. I really don't get it. There's other things you can do. You can just fucking play video games and smoke weed. You know, there's other things that you can do. Yep. So I don't know where to go from there because I don't know how to answer.
Yeah, and I like we had talked about before, like the internet's a great place. It's a powerful place. It's allowing us to share this message with people, and it allows the spread of information at such a blistering blistering pace, right? The amount of information that's out there now compared to when you started is insane. And I think that there is so much, and again, this is my bias because I've kind of grown up with the internet and I've been able to kind of see it adjust over the course of time, is I see that the attention span of committing to objectives gets shorter and shorter because everything is vying for your attention at any given time, right? So, for example, you wanted to get stronger. If I go on Google and search how to get stronger and I just go to a YouTube playlist, I will be taken from all aspects of the world in all different directions. And if I don't know jack shit, and if I don't have a group like that to be able to bounce those ideas off of, or even just gain experience to see somebody squatting that's not you, right? It will get overly you'll just inundate yourself with information. And people they will just like sit there and just end up spending their time Googling shit instead of just trying to figure it out. And I think regardless of how much information is available, the fact of the matter is, like, you always have to start doing the thing. Whatever the thing is, you're not going to be good at it to start ever. And if you are, it's almost more of a detriment if you're really good at something to start with, because that urge to get better and that urge to learn things and to urge to not be the shittiest person in the room at that squat or the weakest human in the room isn't there, right? Like, the fact that you've always wanted to be in the room with the people stronger than you is a powerful motivator, especially when your admittance into that room is based on your performance. Staying there. To be able to stay in that room, you need to keep better.
And the negative stuff is pretty cool. You brought that up because we'll cover that in the next podcast. So you people that are paying attention, we're going to go into this in the next podcast. But I don't want people to misunderstand the culture of these gyms when I was coming up. You didn't get thrown out, right? But there's different dynamics with each place. You would not be treated the same. You wouldn't be thrown in the corner. You wouldn't be like
beaten with a stick.
Well, no, don't stick the dirty dancing.
Oh, don't stick baby in the corner.
You're not going to be the baby in the corner. I mean, everybody's going to look and they're going to make sure you're not going to get hurt.
Yeah,
but they're not going to go out of their way to help you, right? Or if you were kind of offered the help and didn't really embrace it, they're not going to waste their time. Right. So, and that's more, the private club was a little different because you're kind of accepted as soon as you're brought into the club. And I don't know how it all works now, but I'm assuming it's kind of the same way. And now if it was more of a commercial gym that had like powerlifting in the back room or whatever it was going to be, that was a different thing. So I was fortunate I never had to go through a lot of the hurdles other people did because I was stronger. So I didn't come in, atop of a group, but damn close to it. So that, to me, it was more, where does everybody else train? And that's where I was going to go. But to the outsiders that wanted to be in the group, not that the people were an asshole, but maybe we were. I don't know that because I'm not the outsider looking in, but we're not going to embrace it. So you had to find a way. When I was bodybuilding, that's how I had to find a way to get in with these other guys. Like, how do I get in with these other guys? Because I'm not from this land.
Right.
I'm this power lifter guy. I'm strong, but I'm not from this land. I just can't walk up and say, hey, can I train with you guys?
Right.
It's like, how do I do this? And you train at the same time. And I don't know if any of this is even relevant because people don't have to contend with it anymore. But you had to find ways to be able to kind of like wiggle your way into that. Then you find out when they train, then you come train, you kind of work into that. But you're building that trust because I'm pretty sure this is kind of true today. I don't know, because money changes things, because people are charging, to bring people into these groups now. So it changes everything. So people weren't going to help if it wasn't going to be, I don't want to say appreciated, but they're not going to waste their time, right? And they're not going to waste their time if they're not consistent. They're not going to waste their time if they don't really put anything into that as well. But looking back after the things that we talked about earlier, that taught me a lot, about I wonder if that's being taught now, if you have to pay, to be into that group, because now you're paying, now you're going to expect the service.
Right.
So you're expecting that service. So when you expect that service, you're probably not going to be trying to look and see what everybody else is doing, what they're telling everybody else. You're just worried about, are you getting what you're paying for?
Yeah, getting your money's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and another point that I think it would be beneficial to kind of jump into a little deeper is the fact that you had mentioned you had to kind of wiggle your way in to have that conversation or to kind of develop that relationship and whatnot. And I think that is a very good kind of a focus that people need to remember is it took you just showing up to just start that process.
Oh, yeah.
Like you had to be there, right? For the groups that you were training with. That not only if your performance started to go down and your dedication wasn't there, they wouldn't help you as much, right? But now they won't trust you as much, right?
No,
if it had to do with, like, if they had a max effort squat and it was like, okay, well, this shit could go south real quick. I need to make sure that the people spotting me will put themselves in a position to help me, help save my life or help save an injury.
Right. So just being there, right? That's a key thing, because I still wrestled, I still played football during these time periods. So I would literally leave wrestling practice and go straight to the gym where they're squatting. So even being completely shot and dead, may or may not actually train, because it depended upon if there's a match the next day or whatever was going on, or football. There were a lot of Friday nights that I was in the gym spotting people after the game, so that's part of that, and showing up. I mean, it's important, right? So I overlooked that, because to me, it's just kind of assumed that that's going to be, part of the.
But in terms of the process of your growth as a coach, we're getting back like.
Well, they're not going to help.
No,
you know what I'm saying? They're not going to help me.
They're not going to give you the effort if they don't see the effort coming back, right? It's that relationship.
Even moving forward with Louis, when I went there.
Yeah.
Right? So he had to see that I had a passion and wanting to learn how to break these lifts down too, so I could help the other guys in the gym, where he was really big on, you have to help everybody else in the gym, but I was really into it, probably more so than pretty much anybody there.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, how, like, he is, was doing shit that, how the fuck you know that, right? And then you look to other people to validate it, and okay, or you think he's wrong, you're convinced he's wrong, and then 2 months later he was right. You're like, how the fuck did he know that? So if he didn't see that in me, he wouldn't have spent more time trying to teach me all these things, and the training and all the other conversations that we had outside of that, just outside of the gym. Why would I have been any different than any of the other guys?
Absolutely.
My value. The other thing too, though, going back to what I said earlier, I never saw myself as being the best of the best. So the only way I really saw my true value there was how could I make other people better than me?
Yep.
So I still had to show up and play my part. I had to do and put my ass on the line more so than everybody else. But I had to have this other value, because I was afraid, I'm good, but I'm not that good. So how do I keep my value here? And so, there was that as well.
Yeah. And it's funny. We always kind of keep coming back to the live, learn, pass on. And in the medical field, they have see one, do one, teach one, right? So it's you witness a surgery, then you do one yourself, and then you have to teach somebody else the same thing. Yeah. And it's kind of following that same sort of trajectory in terms of coaching, right? And I'm gonna go get the cats out of the bag on this one. This is a secret that I want anybody going to a Train Your Ass Off to learn. This is firsthand experience. If you are going to watch Dave coach and kind of learn as much as you can about not only your squat or your bench or whatever, but how to help other people, or how to see other examples of someone that's not you, maybe struggling with an issue that you may never struggle with or haven't struggled with yet, fucking stand where Dave's standing, right? So you're obviously you move around, but that was one of the things I picked up on, is I wouldn't do it right when you're there. I would do it after you. I would hear what you said, and then I would stand in that position and look for that thing. Mm-hmm. So I would spend more time, and I'm sure it was fucking annoying as shit because I was like hovering around you like a fucking fly. But it was wherever you were standing, I would stand there after you moved, look for the thing or the cue or the point that you made in that position, so I can see the exact same thing potentially that you saw to be able to learn from that.
And that's what I was talking about with the groups earlier too, where there is something that because I did think about this quite a bit. There is something that another thing I do from that part is I always stand back first because I got to see everything move.
Absolutely. Right? I know, because I was chasing you.
I need to see it all. And then if I think I see something, then I'm going to move in closer to see if that's really what I see, and then move back out. The squat becomes a little tricky because if you have to spot, sometimes you're restricted on where you can really move. But if it really has to happen, I got to get somebody else to spot. It happened this weekend. I had to get somebody else to spot so I can get at the angle that I want to see to see if that's really what I got to confirm what I see. Because just because I see it from one angle doesn't mean it's happening.
Right.
So I got to look at a different angle to confirm it, and then a closer angle to see. Then my brain starts diagnostically looking at this. Like, okay, why is this? Is this it's technical, physical, mental? I go through the checklist. Well, the weight's too light. It can't be physical. It's just too damn light.
Yeah.
It's got to be technical, or it can be mental. So you kind of run through the checklist to be able to say.
But it is that skill that you've been able to develop, right? And understanding that how to watch somebody else do something and like just have that knowledge and have those experiences, right? So let's kind of bring this to some of our listeners who may not have a group or who may lift by themselves or whatever. How can they implement some of those coaching tactics that you have into their own training?
Film at different angles, right? So everybody likes to film. This drives me crazy. Everybody likes to film the Instagram shot, right? That's fine if it's Instagram. You get the front squat or whatever it's going to be, squat from the front. But very rarely, as I go through the Train Your Ass Off people now to look at the ones that signed up, I'm looking through their lifts. Very rarely do I see anything I can use.
Right.
Because I'm seeing shitty angles, which is good for Instagram.
But hides a lot of shit.
It's very hard to see anything. And then again, they're not going to post anything that looks bad either. So you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So they're not going to put that out there. And they're usually, it's only the top, the most impressive reps that they think that they've done. So the heaviest or whatever it's going to be. So it almost is the point that it's worthless.
Right.
To be able to look through and see. But people post enough that you can get a little bit of a starting ground on that. And I'm not telling people to post the stuff, right? But if you post from different angles, you'll be able to see things differently. And if they're working with a coach, I would send the coach different angles, because they're going to tell you, but I'm telling you, it's not the same. Squat depth is always a big controversial thing. Adam Driggers many, many years ago filmed, his squat, and I believe it was on a box, so he made sure the height was exactly the same from many different angles. You can't believe how different this looked from these different angles. And that's just a depth thing. That has nothing to do with, technique and other things that you're looking at. But I would say that will help. And then just, see, this is where things get hard because this is where my education part's limited because it always goes into how, not why. Look for fluidity. Look for movements that just look fluid, right? So if something doesn't look right, then it's probably not, right? Because yes, people can squat with their knee going in front of their heel or midfoot or a toe. They can squat in all different positions. It depends upon their structure, their build. It also depends, when I say structure and build, it's not always the femur and the hip. It's how much they fucking weigh. You take somebody that's 5'6", 160, 5'6", 320,
that's a different animal.
It's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
One can squat wide, one can't. One squats too close. It all changes based upon all that. So when things look jacked in some way, it probably is, right? Then hit it from a different angle because you'll look at it and be like, oh, that looks weird. Of course it looks weird, right? Film it from a different angle, then you might see why it looks weird. And if you don't know why it looks weird and say it's an arm, and look at the other arm. What's the other arm doing? Is this doing the same thing as the other arm? And start just looking, unilaterally, look at these different things. Fluidities first. That's going to expose everything.
Right.
If that all goes through and you got to dig deeper, it's like, okay, now where's joint position? Does this look right? Does this look strong? Right? So if a barbell is behind the forearm, does that look strong?
Right.
And people will debate it. Yeah, I get that. But if it's way back here, does that look strong? If the elbow is like cocked way out, does that look strong? Does that look like that can handle 500 pounds of load from that bottom position? No. Well, if the answer is no, and it's 135, but if you did and put 500 in that person and it was going to snap them, why do you think the 135 isn't doing damage at the 500? Right. From the body position standpoint.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of this, again, I've seen it so many times, but I think so much of this is so easy for people to detect, on their own if they film from non-social media angles.
Well, the example that you told me about when we were doing the train your ass off, you're like, just film your deadlift from the side. And see what happens, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh shit!" Like this is.
It's different, and it's way different.
Yeah,
you can see some things from the front, but let's put it this way: there's nothing that you can see from the front that's going to supersede anything I'm going to see from the side. So if the side looks solid, but it still looks jacked up, then I'm going to go to the front.
Right.
Never am I going to go the other way. There's just too many things that you can see from the side to not be able to do that. But from the side, you can't see their eyes. You can't see any mental things.
Right.
Right. So that eliminates one huge component that usually isn't going to be that big of a deal for most people like that. But this also extends past squat, bench, and the desk. It's every movement. Like any movement that just starts to look jacked, right? And some movements are jacked on purpose, right? So the next question would be, if this is jacked on purpose, so a lot of people might look at a sissy squat and think that that's a jacked up movement. I may agree, I may disagree. Let's set that aside. Does it look like a jacked up movement that probably isn't the safest thing for people to do? Yeah. Is it a movement that's been around for a long time? Yes. Is it a movement that a lot of people have got hurt on? Probably not. What's the commonality with most people doing it? Not using a lot of goddamn weight. You don't do max effort work with sissy squats. So, so that's an example of a jacked movement. That's okay, but maybe it still has its application that's why the old saying, there's no bad exercises, just bad application of the exercise. That's where that kind of comes into play.
Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So essentially, just to kind of focus back in a little bit, when you are making an assessment on a lifter or coaching a lifter in person, you always start wide, like a wide-angled lens, and then you focus in. You're essentially treating it like a scientific method. Like you're just trying to test a hypothesis that you have with other information from other angles, right? So if you're lifting by yourself, film yourself at multiple angles. And what's cool about if you're filming yourself, which I think doesn't get talked about much, is you have a better insight to how something felt versus how something objectively looks.
Yes. Right?
So I imagine when you were West Side, or even now, like you can tell, like the connection between a lifter, how they feel and how the lift looked is probably it's pretty big, right?
The people I help, it's everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. But as a newer lifter, say sub 2, 3, 5 years, that connection to those two things is way off. Their perception of how something felt, how something looked, and realistically, what level at which that was in terms of effort is so screwed up. So we've had conversations about that auto-regulation and just even the RPE scale and for different people. It's what advice would you give somebody to kind of start fine-tuning their ability to auto-regulate? And I don't mean just like, I feel like shit today, I'm going to do a little bit less, but truly kind of fine-tune their training for themselves based on the experiences that they have in the gym that day, that week, that month, just build up that repertoire.
Okay. keep the auto regulation in mind because I want to circle back
Sure.
to the compression out and in thing.
Mhm.
So there's two ways that I look at that. So yes, it's wide, then getting narrow, like the scientific part.
Mhm.
But everything in weight training is compression based, right? So say it's a squat, you got the ground and the bar,
Mhm.
right? So I start from the head and the feet. So that's also wide and in, right? So I'm going here to here, but I'm also going here to here. So if they're looking at their own lifts, what are their feet doing? Feet have to be first, right? Then what's the head doing? And then I work opposite of what a lot of people do. When I'm looking, not when I'm correcting, when I'm looking, right? Because all this leads to the core, right? But there's a lot of things going wrong before that, right? So I want to see what's going on with the feet, what's going on with the bar, what's going on with the shoulders, what's going on with the head, what's going on with all
Those
that.
are their initial points of contact.
It's bringing that in because a lot of times this is very, 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 very super low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
You know, take your shoes off, do this, right? This, okay? Because I can start here with the core and start working on all that, how I want them to breathe, brace, whatever anybody wants to call it. It's two entirely different things. I don't give a fuck. I just want it solid, right? If I spend all my time trying to make that solid, but that foot is not rooted and stable because they have running shoes on or something like that, then I'm going to spend way too much time trying to fix something I can't effectively fix yet.
Right.
Or they're carrying the bar way too high. It's up on their neck, right? It needs to be a little bit lower. And maybe if it's a true beginner, maybe the first 3 or 4 sessions is just getting a broomstick in the right position. Because if that's always too high, it's always going to pitch forward. So, wide in, top, bottom, like that. So it's like crunches down, right? So, and then you got to expand it back out once you think you got it to see from there. Now with the auto regulation, with the beginning of the question that you asked was for a lot of those people, don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. You don't have enough reps in. Right. So the ones that can't feel the exercise, right? I do think adding more isolation type movements, peak contractions, just the old school Arnold type of crap, that helps with that a lot. But I do also think there's a neural thing that's just going to take more repetitions to be able to begin to lay that foundation of how it's supposed to feel, which is also going to mean restricting the number of exercises that beginner is doing. Give them the ability to learn how it's supposed to feel. Now, if they're a true beginner, they've never lifted weights before in their life, and you have them doing 150 different exercises a year, how are they supposed to master a skill, know what it feels like? You're trying to tell them, do your biceps burn? Like, what the fuck? What the fuck is that? My forearms burn, but what's my bicep?
Yeah.
So that would be my first answer there. Is I think a lot of people that are just starting out, they get overwhelmed with. Like they don't even get what a pump is. Like, are your lats pumped? They don't even know what that is. And have lifters trying to teach them. I'm guilty of this. When you squat, act like your lats are pumped. Well, it works for some people, but what if they don't know what a lat pump is?
Right.
So you got to come up with something else. So if they eliminate that stress and just do the movements enough, and then once the technique is reinforced to a point to where it can almost look hydraulic, then start pumping the shit out of it, right? So you can, sodium load, low carbs, whatever you want to do, NO explode, any of this stupid shit like that, which I hate. But something like that, and then I call it piston pump. Just pump the shit out of it or try to get it. So they at some point are like, whoa, what the fuck?
What is that?
That's your bicep.
Yep.
Right? Now, you don't need to do it all the time, but now they're aware. That's your bicep. But you need to explain to them, just because it's pumped right now and it's burning right now, when I tell you, when you do pull downs, you don't want to feel it in your biceps. That doesn't mean your biceps are going to feel like that. Right. So there's that disconnect. It's too overwhelming, I think, to where for those people, if they just focus on the movement and training hard, right? That now the RPE comes into there, right? So I don't think people train hard enough on accessories and supplemental things. And to better explain what I'm trying to say there is I do like accessories and I got to define those at some point. Let's just say movements that aren't core movements to be trained to failure. But I'm going to back up real quick, real fast. So I just said it and got away real quick. That's using a controlled tempo. No increase in tempo, no decrease in tempo, just a controlled tempo to when the movement starts to slow to where you don't think you can get another rep, stop. That doesn't mean when it starts to get hard, you start Valsalva maneuver and pushing a little bit harder. That doesn't mean you lose any little body English. This is a different thing we're talking about here.
Right, the context matters.
It's still failure, right? But is it, in my true definition, if I was working with you or if I was working with somebody that's a little bit more exam, no, that's not, right? But we're trying to teach the beginner how to feel a muscle.
Right.
So let's take as many variables out, have that controlled tempo, and just let it run until the speed slows and it's about ready to stop, right? That's a different RPE than if I'm working with somebody that, okay, they've done the 8 reps, they want to get 12. So after 8, pause for a second, recollect, boom, knock out 2 more, pause for a second. It's kind of a rest pause, but is it? That is where I think beginners really begin to misunderstand that, because they'll start maybe a little controlled and then they get sloppy.
Just swinging shit.
Yeah, and that's okay, you know, for certain situations. But if they don't understand how tempo impacts the lift jet, then they're using principles that are beyond what they should be using.
That's fantastic way to end that, because I was going to be talking about you need to develop the skill before you can maximize any sort of output.
Of any lift.
Even
if it's a machine, there's still a skill.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if they don't have the skill, whether it's a cognitive skill, because you had mentioned this on the skill, building a skill acquisition podcast that you did the other day, is you need to learn that thing at the simplest, slowest, most directly focused in level you can before you can add all of these other variables to it, right? Because then they'll just cloud the signal. If the signal isn't there, with that skill work, you need to develop that signal. It's like, for example, the biceps, right? You're trying to get them to understand how to flex their biceps. And they have no idea what the hell you're talking about. It's like, okay, well, we're going to do this so slow and controlled. And as soon as you fatigue and you can't do it the correct way, we have to stop, because now you're muddying the waters
what you're trying to teach.
What you're trying to teach this person.
Yes.
So, but like you had said, a more advanced lifter, a more advanced bodybuilder, whatever, like they have that baseline skill, and now you're working at a different level up here to train them and challenge them at a more output focused level for them to gain the size they need, to get the training stimulus they need specifically to grow and develop for whatever their goal is.
Yes.
Right? We see a lot of newer lifters who are just training to like for example, just like if they were to be a newer lifter and they're like, I just love Dorian Yates, I'd be like, holy shit, this is going to be a train wreck. Let me get tickets, right? Because they have not developed the skill of pushing their body into feeling the things they're supposed to feel and locking in that technique and that form to reach those end levels of output to get the results that they need.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, and I think that I like the bicep example, because that's usually the place that I'll start with men, right? So biceps, pecs, and ass is the muscles that I start with. 'Cause I think anybody who has 5-10 years of training should be able to just sitting comfortably, naturally flex every body part in their body. You know, calves, pecs, shoulders. Shoulders are a bitch. Takes a long time. Shoulders, lats, biceps, triceps. And anybody can, it takes a while to bounce your pecs and shit like that.
Sure.
It's a little different with women because the pec's going to be a little bit harder to be able to do, but quad is usually a little easier for them to connect with. But you got to find something, right? And the bicep seems to be the easiest for most people to start with. And then getting that, call it mind muscle connection, I don't care what you want to call it, right? It still has to be there. And years ago I got lit up on fire because I was saying beginners need to do more isolation movements, shit like concentration curls and things that just focus on those isolation exercises so they can feel what that muscle feels like, because a lot of them, even with the bicep, for example, their front delts are going to start lighting up. right? Because they're still moving the shoulder when they shouldn't move the shoulder.
Right.
And it's subtle, but it's enough that it's going to compensate enough that that's still good. It's like, well, that's your delt, it's your front delt. That's a good thing, but it's the and I still think this matters down the line outside of bodybuilding, because if I'm working with a higher level power lifter, I'm like, you need to get more tricep activation. I need them to know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Right.
You know, when you're locking out, what do you feel if you really focus on it? Now, sometimes you got to use a made-up exercise, a band, something they can still keep focused to feel. But are you feeling your lats? Are you feeling the triceps? Are you feeling just everything? Are you just feeling joints? But that, for the beginners, dialing that back, and it could just be as simple as do as many push-ups as you can and tell me what feels tight.
Yeah.
It could be the triceps. You don't know. Let's wrap this one down, and then
let's
we'll bring up some of this other stuff on the next podcast.
Awesome. All right, guys.